Well, guys, I said I'd be joined as the day goes on and as the weekend goes on by various folk who have been a part of either racing, purveying the racing, being part of a family of racers, and just damn well enjoying being part of what is a famous event. Bobby Aitken joins me, and Bobby, we've kind of crossed paths over the years many times. I know the name, and obviously Brian Redmond is high in my family's book of great names that have been part of motorsporting. Big family friend of ours, but so too yours, your family.
Yeah, Brian and Marion are dear friends, and I've had the privilege of knowing Brian since I think I was about 8 years old, and they've spent many great times with the Redmonds at tracks all over the world, and also some of my favorite times with Brian actually at our house out in Montauk Point. He and Marion would come and spend a week every year, and it was just wonderful.
Yeah, it seems ironic. I was talking to him briefly recently. We were laughing at the fact that he's done all these dangerous races over the years in the most dangerous times of the 70s, and has written a book about it as well. Yep. And yet we almost lose him in a hurricane.
Almost, yeah. Well, we did lose him. They couldn't find him
for days. And
Marion couldn't find him, and you know, you mentioned he got hurt in some pretty nasty wrecks and stuff.
He did.
But one of the worst accidents he ever had was trying to go surfing in Montauk, and the board flipped up and hit him in the nose and broke his nose.
You know, no. I mean, as much as it's only when you get to know someone like Brian that you realize that as great as and as revered as I've been to Le Mans with him, carried his helmet and all that, but as great as he is and revered as he is in the world of motorsport, he's just a normal guy.
Absolutely, just like the rest of us.
Just like the rest of us.
Probably should stay in his lane.
Yeah. Bobby, what's your history with racing on the West Coast, first of all, and this particular event?
Yeah, I mean, I'm older than dirt now, but I've been coming to this race for a very long time. My dad, my mom, and my older sister, we loaded his 1959, I think, Lotus 11 in Terrytown, New York, on an open trailer behind our Pontiac station wagon, and we drove across the country. I think I was 8 years old. We drove across the country for him to compete in the second annual Monterey Historic Car Races.
Wow, in 75.
And in 75. And then he came out here, and he was thoroughly beaten by Chris Cord in a birdcage Maserati. And he was none too happy about that. So he immediately started working on trying to find a car that could beat a birdcage. And he found a Cooper Monaco that had a 2.5 liter Climax engine in it. Most of them were Maseratis in the day, but this was a 2.5 liter Climax that had raced in Buenos Aires. And he built that up over the course of the year. We loaded it on the trailer, we towed it back across the country, and sure enough, he won. So that was revenge, and really was a special time. And so then we came to a few of them, then he stopped, and I got into the television business, and we were launching Speed Vision at the time. And I went to my boss, Roger Werner, and I said, hey, Roger, I think we should do Monterey. And I called Steve Earle, who was the guy running it at the time, and said, hey, Steve, what do you think about doing some TV? And he thought it was a great idea. And so I did basically what you guys are doing now for almost 20 years or so.
Which was an important time, because had it not been for that coverage, and I know that Speed Vision is still currently working in Formula One with Bob Varsha, who's probably there and probably part of the team at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Fox had some time with it as well, but it is an important part. You can have an event, but if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, it's the old story. So
yeah, absolutely
thanks
right.
to people like yourself who were mavericks in the day, because I would have thought back then people said, historic racing, is that gonna work?
Yeah,
on TV?
You, nobody really thought it was gonna work, to be honest. And but the cars are amazing, and there are so many great stories with each car. And whether you're talking about the Brian Redmonds of the world, or the 3.0 CSL that's here that he and Peterson drove, there's so many stories about those guys, and those stories live on, and so people love it.
Yeah, and it really truly is the history And it's not like we're just talking about the history, we're showing it. These are the original cars. And we now start our Ken Miles 60s GT Trophy. And for those of you who recognize the name and perhaps think to yourself, where do I know that name from? Well, he's come into fame in recent years because of the Ford versus Ferrari movie, which was effectively about him and his endeavors to help Ford build their famous car that won in 1966. It should have been a win for him, and in fact it would have been a triple crown for Ken Miles back in 66, having won Daytona and Sebring, but unfortunately, you know, the PR companies, they always get in the way.
Politics.
Yeah. They wanted a photo finish, and Ken Miles was denied. I have to say, when you really hear the truth, the film makes it look as though he kind of went, okay. But really, I'm sure he still was probably quite bitter about it.
Yeah, absolutely. He got robbed for sure, and he was not too happy about it. But I'll tell you, he is one of the great unsung race engineers, drivers that ever lived. And I was really happy to see how he was overall portrayed in the film. You know, there was some talk in the early scripts apparently that he was kind of going to be placed as the bad guy and a villain, and I'm glad they treated him with the respect he deserved.
Yeah, and you know, Ken Miles, if you think about why we're here and what we're talking about, somebody spun around at the top of the course.
Wrong direction.
That's not good. He's at least in a position where nobody should go near him. But yeah, Ken Miles was the epitome of fitting in here in America, coming from, you know, Birmingham in England and Solihull and that part of the world, which of course was a major part of the British motorsport and motoring industry back then. It's where I grew up. Yeah, I mean, but he came here, and because he decided, you know, he calls himself a mechanic and said that the driving was for a hobby. But when you see who he raced against and for and alongside, Bruce McLaren, Chris Amon, you name it, he was more than just a mechanic.
Absolutely. I had the pleasure of meeting his son here many years ago, but we had a bit of a bond on both losing our fathers in motorsport and continuing on to still love motorsport. And I sat with him for a couple hours and just heard some of the stories about the family and Shelby, who we both knew at the time. It was pretty special.
Yeah, no question. So tell me about your father's career.
So my dad really started racing at a very young age. He was racing a Veloci Spider back in the day, and had an old Thunderbird that he raced, and raced at places like Marlboro with the likes of Roger Penske, where they drove there and taped over their headlights and went racing. And was very close friends with Peter Revson, and if Revson had his way, I would have never been born, because he's like, Bob, we got to go to Europe, and my dad said, well, Peter, I got to go earn a living. I got a job, right? You know, Peter didn't have that burden of reality, so he had to give up racing for quite a while. But then he started vintage racing again in the 70s, and he got hooked up with Steve Earle, who was the original founder of this event, and they bought a car together and ran Daytona in George Dyer's old 911 RSR. And they finished 5th, and then they went to Sebring and finished 4th, and then they went somewhere else, and all of a sudden these two guys who had really never done anything serious were leading the World Endurance Championship. Wow. And it went on from there, and ran IMSA for many years, and probably arguably the most iconic livery Porsches in motorsport. The Coca-Cola Porsche team was amazing.
Well, they're not holding back coming out of 11, that's for sure, here at Laguna Seca. A lot of people say, are they racing? And I'm like, yeah, when they're getting out of sideways like that, they're racing hard. And it's great to see.
Absolutely, and seeing that Cobra up there is pretty special. So
that was a 79 Forest Straight in that Ford GT350 from 1965, just going through shot there. Jim Farley still leading. I don't know if you heard, but we interviewed Jim just a moment ago, but he summed it all up. You know, he goes, it's now becoming B2B for me. He said, you know, it's a business deal. But you've seen this event now grow, and that's, if you like, one of the benefits of it. It not only is a fantastic spectacle and a chance for fans like us to see these cars, but yeah, I mean, obviously people of like minds, people in the business of motorsport and the motoring industry, will always gather here to enjoy the racing, but a chance to also do some business.
Absolutely, and seeing Farley out there is just, uh-oh.
That's the number 7. That is Jay Peril in that 66 Corvette. That's not looking good. He's got out of the way, I'm glad to say. I just wonder, Patrick Byrne started in his Corvette just behind James Farley, and I wonder if, you know, if there's a thought where he's thinking, I just got to get ahead of Jim Farley, and Chevrolet will be happy with me.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Jim's a hell of a driver. He's really honed his craft well, and he spends a lot of time here. He has a house right up the road, and so he's here quite a bit, and you know, he's just a great guy. He's so passionate, loves working on cars. Restored, you know, one of these cars in his own garage over a period of about 9 years. Really, really awesome.
I think that's the 31, the second car in this group to turn around. Right at the top, that's Craig Carter in the Corvette 64.
Looks like there's a fair amount of liquid on the line there. You can see the guys trying to get around it, so there's a bit of oil in there somewhere, and that's going to cause havoc.
We mentioned the future, if you like, of Laguna Seca, and this deal, if you will, that kind of preserves the next 50 years. Huge thing for Laguna Seca and the people that love the sport. Massive.
Look, the challenge that this place has always had is that it was part of the county park system.
Yeah.
And thus, it couldn't be run as much as Scramp did amazing things. It wasn't able to run as a business.
Yeah.
And that makes, and racetracks are hard enough, but when you're working as a park, it makes it impossible.
Yeah, and you're in such a salubrious area like Monterey, above, you know, some of the greatest real estate in America. And so, yeah, it's had its ups and downs as Laguna Seca in terms of keeping everybody happy. Not everybody's into motor racing, and so much.
What do you mean everybody's not into motor racing?
Well, I hear in the hills occasionally over the last 50 years, there's the odd one. People like Rainier put them straight, and Eddie Lewis.
Well, the reality, though, is the guys that really tick me off are the ones that move here knowing full well there's a racetrack here, and then try to shut it down. So I think they're in a great place right now, and the future looks better than, frankly, it ever has.
You know, it's interesting. I came in the back way, which is a great way to come in, and really, you go through at least 5 miles of absolute nothing before you get there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, we won't get into the politics of what's happened here, because it's all good, and the future is very good. And I have to say, as we look at Mike Parsons in his Ford Shelby, I wonder, you've been, like you say, you've been coming here since the 70s, since you started putting it out on TV. But what, you know, when you come here, I mean, I'm looking at that anniversary collection outside that was in the paddock, and I have to say, it's not often that I go, my mouth drops and goes, gosh, that really is the original Mercedes there that Michael drove, and blah, blah, blah. That's not at old, but it's still an amazing car.
No, you know, it's not about old per se, right? It's about, you know, yes, history, but it's much more about importance and cars that mean something. That's not good.
So we've got, the reason why I've got Black Flag, and they'll bring them all in now, and they have done, is that we've got a few cars, one stuck at the corkscrew, and we've got this car here stuck out on the track as well, or at least has stopped in the pit lane. But yeah, is there anything that kind of took your, not breath away, but were you pleased to see kind of in orbit? Because we are celebrating some fantastic cars.
I mean, the cars here are just stunning. I was really impressed and awed by the Allard that's down there that belongs to Bill Harlan. Bill is an amazing driver. He's had the car forever and raced it here years ago, and is also arguably the greatest winemaker in one of the great winemakers of the world, and certainly the top one in California. So he's an interesting kind of Renaissance guy, you know.
Yeah, it is the car at the top of the corkscrew. That's Craig Carter in that 64 Corvette, stuck up the top there. I love that shot. I love looking down on the valley there. You really see the drop-off, which you don't see often on TV. The drone really has, I'm sure, as a TV guy, you notice this too. You're seeing motor racing in a different, this era is quite different, isn't it?
Yeah, drones have changed all of production, whether it's TV, film, and motor racing. It's really changed the dynamic. I mean, in the old days, we had to fly helicopters.
Yes.
And they're really, really expensive, really dangerous.
Like $200 an hour or something.
Yeah, and at a place like this, it was hard to fly helicopters because you're in the flight path of the airport. So it was really dicey to get aerial coverage, and the in-car camera was always done through bouncing off a helicopter to get the feed down to the production trucks. So it was always a hard thing to do, and drones have completely changed that.
Well, I also have worked in current modern-day Trans Am for the last few years with this production company, and the shot you're looking at now, which is just showing the incident, is also helpful to race control, because it's the quickest way we can say, oh, what do we need here?
Sure.
What's the situation? How can we alleviate it as quickly as possible? We need to send a truck, it's broken down, blah. And so we're able to show quicker than perhaps the marshals or a radio, and they'll back that up, obviously. But it's a lot easier for a race director to understand the situation, whether there is debris down or oil down or something down that has caused it, and to see it from above is a huge innovation.
Yeah, 100%. You were talking about some of the cars that are on display. The other one, I just never get tired of seeing it, just because I grew up with it, was Holbert's 962. I was more partial to the Coke car, but the seeing that fabulous car is something else. And I actually had the privilege of driving that car a couple of years ago, and it was stunning.
Well, as we celebrate 50 years, I think as an Englishman, I think I'm really proud to say that the way that the European and Japanese invasion were accepted here in the States as competition and as respected competition, rather than we're the Americans, we know what we're doing. It was very much a case of, and of course, obviously they made themselves present with the likes of Sterling Moss and many others coming over. And that was, I think, a big part of the early days of racing here in the States, was that a lot of the Europeans loved to come and race here, and of course the manufacturers wanted to sell their cars, particularly on the West Coast.
Absolutely, and yeah, those guys coming over, it also stepped the game up substantially for American drivers to race with those guys, and brought a whole new level of driving to the U.S. and it was an amazing time.
You know, we mentioned Brian Redman, but there were so many others, Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon we mentioned, but you know, Vic Elford, so many raced and loved and enjoyed racing in the States. I was reading up about Mario Andretti the other day, saying that he didn't want to do a full season for Enzo Ferrari. The money wasn't that good in Formula One back then, and I had to smile. He was making more money doing 5,000 in Can-Am than he was doing Formula One. Yeah.
Sterling was an amazing guy. He came to this race on a regular basis for many, many years, and I got to know him quite well. And
didn't he win one of the original?
Yeah, I think
road races.
Yeah, absolutely. When they first built the track.
Amazing.
Funny side note of Sterling. One day I lived in Manhattan Beach, California, and it was like a random Tuesday, and 8 o'clock at night or whatever, and I went to give the dog a walk around the block, and I'm walking back up to my house, and I'm looking through the window, and there are people in my house, and I'm like, who are these people in my house on a random Tuesday? And I look a little closer, and I'm like, that looks like Sterling Moss. And
he found you.
And I had no idea he knew where I lived or anything like that, but it turned out that he and Lady Moss showed up at my house because they knew a guy down the street, and somehow my name came up. And Sterling said, yeah, I know Bobby, let's go say hi.
That's funny.
Not every day you walk into your house and find Sir Sterling Moss.
A legend of the sport, yes.
Yeah, it was hilarious. Very funny.
Yeah, we don't put paintings on the wall of our legends, they just come and visit you. No, a great man, and actually fascinating. If you ever read about Sterling Moss, and you know, he was an inventor as well as a great racing driver. He had all sorts of funky things in his house. Not always helpful to him because he fell down his elevator. He fell down his own elevator in his house once. Unbelievable. The best things. Again, when we talk about Brian Redman, Sterling Moss, another crash by a racing driver that wasn't on the racetrack. It's ironic. So we look down high above the corkscrew. We've had a black flag situation in our Group 6 first run. We're listening to Bobby Aitken, who's been a part of this event and, of course, part of the racing scene here in California for many, many a year. And is there anybody you want to catch up with this weekend that you
you know, I just love being here.
Yeah,
people,
you never know who you're going to see, right?
Yeah, you know. Oh, they're ending the session. So
okay, fair enough.
On a checker. That's too bad. But I guess Farley gets a win.
That's a good point. Very good point.
Yeah, exactly.
Jim Farley takes the win.
Absolutely. You know, Farley is such a car guy, and you know, it's such a breath of fresh air to see the president of Ford Motor Company out there wheeling a Ford product around a racetrack. I'm not sure how his insurance company feels about it, but somehow he gets away with it, and I think it actually brings a level of passion to Ford that transfers throughout the entire company.
Yeah, no question. As you can see, we had a red flag situation which ends that, and obviously another flag showing that there is debris and some sort of substance down on the track, which is why cars were spinning at the corkscrew. But yes, it looks as though Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford Motor Company, and what a chance to get out and about. It's interesting times for Ford as they forge on into the electric era, and of course, back into Formula One after so many years. So, yeah, I'm sure he loves his racing and likes to avoid a bit of work while he's enjoying his time in the Cobra. But congratulations to him, and thank you to Bobby Aiken coming in here and joining us. Hope you enjoy your weekend and
Absolutely.
getting around the paddock. Thanks for coming and joining us, and we hope to have more folks like that coming up and sharing their views and thoughts on this amazing event as we celebrate half a century of racing here at Laguna Seca. Join us after the break.